a family torn apart by blood and loyalty. This is a story of sacrifice, forgiveness, and brotherhood. It's also a story of one man who put everything on the line to save his brother. This is the story of Richard. Richard was born in a small town, grew up in a normal family with a normal childhood. He had everything he needed, including the love of his parents and a little brother named Robert. The brothers were only 2 years apart, which meant that they did everything together. They played football, video games, and even shared a room. Richard admired his younger brother. Robert was popular in school. Girls liked him. Everyone liked him. He was kind, charismatic, and funny. Richard couldn't have asked for a better brother. Their peaceful life came crashing down when their father lost his job at the factory. Their mother started working extra shifts as a waitress. And although money wasn't an issue, it was the constant fighting between their parents that took a toll on the boys. One night, after hearing their parents screaming at each other, Robert ran out of the house crying. Richard followed him outside, and Robert looked back at Richard and said, "I wish I could disappear." Those words stuck with Richard. His parents' fights continued for weeks until one day their dad packed his things and left. Soon after, their mom took the boys to a different city and found a new apartment. But Richard knew that his mother was unhappy, even though she tried to hide it. Richard dropped out of school at 16. He got a full-time job at a local gas station. He was determined to take care of his mother and Robert so they wouldn't have to worry about anything. Richard was a hard worker, but it wasn't enough. Their mother still struggled to make ends meet, so Richard made a drastic decision. He enlisted in the army. He was sure that this was the best choice because not only would he get training and experience, but he would also get paid and could send money home to his mother. He didn't tell anyone, especially Robert, where he was going. Just disappeared. Richard was gone for a year until one day Robert received a letter from Richard saying that he joined the army and was serving overseas. Robert was angry. He confronted their mother and told her that she never told him that Richard joined the army. She cried and told Robert that she didn't know Richard was going to do that. She thought he was just going to travel around Europe. Robert felt betrayed, hated his brother for doing something like that behind his back. But their mother insisted that Richard was trying to help them, and that they should be grateful. Robert just stormed off. Meanwhile, Richard was deployed to a war zone. It was scary, but he knew that he was doing what he had to do. He kept himself busy with training and drills. But at night, when he was alone, he missed his family. He called home whenever he could, but the calls were expensive, so he didn't call often. Still, Richard managed to save some money. He used it to buy clothes and other necessities for his mother and Robert. Robert, on the other hand, was having trouble adjusting to high school. He was failing most of his classes. He argued with his teachers and his peers. He missed his brother, but more than that, he missed the person their brother used to be, the joyful kid that always had his back. One day, Robert came home from school and saw a package waiting for him. It was from Richard. He opened it and saw a beautiful leather jacket. Robert liked it, but he threw it on the floor. He was mad at Richard. Richard wrote a letter apologizing for not telling him where he was going. He said that he was sorry for leaving and that he missed him. Robert wrote back, saying that he understood why Richard did what he did, but that didn't make it any less painful. Robert also wrote that he missed him. Robert's anger towards Richard slowly faded away. He missed his brother. Meanwhile, Richard was preparing to leave the military. When he returned home, he planned to start a new life. He wanted to go to college and become a police officer. But his plans changed when he met Sarah. She was beautiful and intelligent. They started dating. A year later, they were engaged. Richard was happy, but he knew that his past would catch up to him sooner or later. He didn't want to hide it anymore. He told Sarah everything. He told her about his abusive father, his mother, and about Robert. Sarah didn't care. She loved him for who he was. She supported him and promised to be by his side no matter what. Richard was lucky to have her. The day Richard and Sarah were getting married, Richard's commanding officer called him. He told Richard that he has to report back to duty immediately. Richard's deployment was extended for another 6 months. Richard was devastated, didn't want to go. He had his whole life planned out. Now everything was ruined. Sarah tried to comfort him, but Richard didn't want her pity. He was mad at his brother. If Robert hadn't talked to their mom about joining the army, then they wouldn't be in this situation. Richard picked up his bags and left without saying goodbye. Sarah cried. She was furious at Richard's brother for ruining her wedding and her future. Richard returned to the war zone. He worked hard and tried to keep himself busy, but all he could think about was Sarah. He missed her every moment of every day. He wished he could go back, but he knew that he couldn't. So he worked even harder. But it wasn't enough. Richard got injured during a mission. When he returned home, he had to recover physically and psychologically. Richard was able to return to work, but he was no longer the same. He couldn't sleep. He was jumpy and anxious. He felt like everyone was against him. Richard was having a hard time coping with post-traumatic stress disorder. He didn't tell anyone, especially not Sarah. He didn't want to burden her. One day, Richard was driving home from work. He was exhausted and just wanted to take a nap. But when he closed his eyes, he saw horrible images from the war zone. He pulled over. He didn't want to drive like that. Richard went to see a psychologist. He told her everything. Finally, he admitted that he wasn't okay. The psychologist prescribed him medication. Slowly, Richard began to feel like himself again. He was still jumpy, but the medication helped. Richard was ready to move on. But then he got a call from Robert. Robert was in trouble. He was arrested for selling drugs. Richard was shocked. He told Robert that he would come and bail him out. Robert begged Richard to not tell Sarah because he was ashamed and didn't want her to find out. Richard arrived at the police station. He bailed Robert out and brought him home. Sarah was furious. She didn't know that Richard had a brother. She didn't even know that he had a past. She broke up with him. Richard was devastated. He was already struggling with his PTSD, and now he had to deal with a broken heart. Richard moved into his mother's house. He felt like a failure. He let his mother, brother, and even Sarah down. Robert apologized to Richard for keeping secrets from him and for not being there for him when he needed it the most. Richard forgave him.
He knew that they were brothers,
and that they had to stick together through thick and thin. Richard began to work extra shifts at the gas station, saved up money, and enrolled in college, studied hard, and graduated with honors. He became a police officer. Richard was finally happy. He had everything he ever wanted.